Once upon a time, in a world fresh with creation, two brothers named Cain and Abel toiled the land as farmers. Cain, the elder, was strong and industrious, while Abel was gentle and filled with a deep love for the soil and its bounties. But envy brewed in Cain's heart, fueled by the attention and favor that seemed to flow effortlessly toward Abel. When their offerings to the divine were presented, Cain's crops were met with a lesser regard, stoking the flames of jealousy within him. One fateful day, Cain's envy reached its boiling point. In a fit of rage and envy, he struck down Abel in the field where they had once toiled side by side. The earth itself seemed to tremble at the weight of this heinous act, and the world forever changed. God, the divine judge, passed a sentence on Cain, a punishment perhaps worse than death itself. You are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, God declared. To many people, it would seem that Cain received a lesser punishment than he deserved for murder. So it leaves us with the question, why wasn't Cain given capital punishment? Let's think about it. The ground, which had witnessed the spilling of Abel's blood, would no longer yield its bounty to Cain's hands. He was condemned to a life of wandering and solitude, carrying the heavy burden of his guilt. Cain, realizing the weight of his punishment, pleaded with God, claiming the burden was too great to bear. He feared retribution from others who might seek his life. To protect him, God marked Cain in a mysterious way, a sign that he was not to be harmed by others. Some wondered why Cain had not faced the ultimate punishment, death, for his grievous crime. The answer lay in the severity of his sentence. To be cut off from the land and face a life without fruitful toil was, to Cain, a fate worse than mere death. As time unfolded, it became clear that God had other plans for Cain's lineage. Despite the darkness of the past, Cain's descendants achieved notable feats. However, violence continued to stain their legacy, as seen in the tale of Lamech, another of Cain's kin who also turned to murder. In those ancient days, the world's population was sparse, and this fact led some to believe that sparing Cain's life was a pragmatic decision. Yet, regardless of the reasoning, God's judgment stood firm, and Cain was to carry his penance through life. Another reason that has been proposed to explain why Cain was not sentenced to death was the relatively small population of the earth at that time. While this theory holds merit, it's important to note that the scripture does not explicitly confirm it. Instead, we find evidence in the fact that Cain already had a wife, a descendant of Adam and Eve, and even established a settlement. Adam and Eve, in addition to Abel, had another son named Seth, and undoubtedly there were other children who contributed to the early inhabitants of the world. It was in later times, with the establishment of the Noahic covenant, that murder was firmly established as a capital crime. The death penalty was formally outlined in the Mosaic law, as indicated in the Book of Numbers. Cain, however, existed before the era when God mandated death as the punishment for murder. In the course of humanity's evolution, as societies grew and laws were established, murder eventually became a capital offense. The moral fabric of civilization evolved, and the death penalty found its place in the statutes of justice. But in those early days, in the aftermath of the first fratricide, God had chosen a punishment fitting for the first murderer, a fate for Cain worse than death.